Hey guys, welcome back. So today we are going to transfer one of your designs to your foam. Now it doesn't have to be 100% what you drew on the paper. This is like your blueprint, your guideline to your final design, so you can still make some changes. Now I've got a few different supplies out to use today. It really just depends on what works best for you and what you're comfortable with. So I have got a regular pencil, I've grabbed my Sharpie, and I've also grabbed a regular old ballpoint pen. Try not to use anything that's like got a really delicate tip. Just a regular old kind of cheap pen works kind of really great for this. So it's really up to you and what you're comfortable with. I think my favorite tool is probably the pen, but you can totally accomplish what we're about to do with the pencil as well. The Sharpie is actually for drawing. So the first thing we're going to do is take our Sharpie and we are going to draw our design in Sharpie on our foam first. The reason why we're using Sharpie is it's waterproof, okay? So it's not going to smudge on us, and it's going to make sure that our design gets on there, and then we have something easy to trace, okay? So you can use your reference image as a guide. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this pattern, but I'm going to turn it onto a diagonal, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that by starting with my loops. And then I have my zigzag. And then I go to my loops again. I think putting it on a diagonal makes it just a touch more interesting. Okay, all the way across. And then let's see, I've got my castle next. This will be a little harder to do on a diagonal, but I think it'll be okay. So remember, up, down, trying to stay as geometric as possible. Okay, and then I made those dashes in the middle, so I'll go ahead and put those on. And then I made the opposite castle. So I have to be careful to make it symmetrical, otherwise I don't think it'll look as interesting. And hopefully you're really happy with your design. If you're not really happy with your design, take some time and redo it. It's totally okay. Every artist revises their work, has multiple versions of their work. Okay, so I've got those. I've got to go back to my zigzag. So I copied the same design from my first sketch, but I flipped it to make it on the diagonal, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So we can go ahead and put our sketchbook away at this point. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to use it as a pad for my tracing, because when we push, we're going to push kind of hard. So putting it on a padded surface like a magazine or your sketchbook is going to be perfect so that you're not worried about scratching your table, okay? I don't want you to scratch your surface that you're working on. I want you to make sure your furniture doesn't get ruined. So go ahead and put it on your sketchbook as a pad. Now this is where the pen or the pencil comes in handy, or both, whatever you want to test out and be comfortable with. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to take a sharp object, but not super sharp. That's why the pen works nice, because it's rounded. And you are going to push and trace over all of your Sharpie, okay? So you're going to push into the styrofoam kind of hard, but not so hard that you can't, that you're like ripping holes and cutting all the way through the styrofoam. We're just trying to make indentations in the top. So basically, I'm tracing super carefully and putting pressure on my hand. You're gonna need to take breaks. It does take a little longer than the pencil part, or than the Sharpie part, right? It's gonna take at least twice as long because we're going nice and slow and you're pressing in to the styrofoam. And then all the way to my edges. And if I hold this up, hopefully you can see it. You can kind of see where the styrofoam is starting to get a little rough. That's because it's been indented. Let's see if I turn it sideways, if you can see that. There we go. You can see a little bit. Okay, so this loop-de-loop is done, but I haven't done my zigzag yet. So I'm going to go back down And I'm going to do the zigzag next. And I'm going to hold my paper and push. Hold my paper and push. Basically, every time my line switches, I'm going to pull my pencil or my pen up and kind of re-grip. But the key to this is to definitely go slow. And let's say maybe you didn't press hard enough the first time and you can kind of tell just by looking at your styrofoam that it doesn't even look or feel like you imprinted into it. You can always go over it a second time. In fact, I'm going to recommend that you go over it carefully a second time. The second time will be a lot easier because it'll already have that kind of pathway carved out for you. And you can kind of redo it and just ensure that everything is pressed down. Because remember, in order to make the printmaking work and to see this pattern, we have to press down where our lines are so that everything else is a raised surface and will print very nicely. Okay, so I'm going to take my time and trace over my entire project anywhere where I have Sharpie. Don't panic if you accidentally ripped a little hole in your styrofoam, but that's usually kind of telling you that you're pressing too hard. It shouldn't be super hard to press into the styrofoam, but sometimes curves can kind of slow you down a little bit, so don't be surprised if you have to go over something once, twice, or 3 times when it's more curved so that you can actually kind of get that smooth circular motion of your pattern. And I just missed my Sharpie a little bit, but I'm going to keep going. Sometimes the styrofoam gets you off track a little bit. So that's why a lot of times I will take my hand, kind of shake it, give it a little rest, reposition myself, and then go back into the tracing. Okay? It's super important. I'm going to say this again. Don't rush the tracing. Do your best to get it all done today. But if you need to work on it another time, that's fine before we get to the next step. Because I know that it can kind of hurt your hand a little bit because you're usually holding your pen or your pencil super tight. So again, you can achieve the same thing with a pencil by pushing into the styrofoam and tracing over your lines. It's the same concept. But don't do anything like use something super sharp. We want something that has a dull but pointy tip. Because if you use something super sharp, you'll end up cutting through your styrofoam, and we want your styrofoam to stay in one piece if possible. All right, guys, so you're going to go and trace everything today, and then remember to double check. You're kind of going for feel, and you're looking really closely to make sure those indentations are there. All right, so you should be able to even see a little bit of difference in the top half of my project than the bottom. You can see where I've traced and indented and where I haven't yet, so hopefully you will notice the same on yours. All right, guys, have a good one.